Marcus is 35 years old. He's a software engineer outside of Austin, Texas. He maxes his 401k every year, puts another $1,200 a month into a Vanguard brokerage account, drives a 2020 Camry, and has never once told a coworker how much he has saved. The number is $340,000. And every single morning, he wakes up and wonders if it's enough. Diana is also 35. She teaches 8th grade English in a suburb outside Columbus, Ohio. 2 weeks ago, she submitted her resignation letter. Her principal asked if everything was okay. She said yes, thanked him, and walked back to her classroom. She has $890,000 invested. She hasn't told anyone. Both of these people have spent the last decade doing the right things, saving, investing, ignoring the noise. The difference between them is not discipline. It's not income. It's not even the gap between $340,000 and $890,000, though that matters. The difference is that Diana knew her number. Marcus is still trying to find it. That's what this video is about. Not a magic figure that works for everyone. Not a spreadsheet. Not a motivational promise. Just the actual math behind what it costs to buy your freedom at 35, and why most people who could afford it never get there, because they never know when they've arrived. If you're someone who's been investing for years and still doesn't feel like you're close enough, subscribe and like this video. It will help more than you think. Here's the question most people ask. How much do I need to retire? It's the wrong question. Retirement is a date. Freedom is a condition. And they are not the same thing. Retirement is what happens at 65 when your employer stops calling. Freedom is what happens when you realize you could stop and you'd be okay. The gap between those two things is where most people spend their entire working lives without ever noticing it. The real enemy here isn't a lack of information. Everyone has heard of the 4% rule. Everyone knows they should max their 401k. The enemy is not knowing what finish line you're actually running toward. People optimize for a number they never defined, which means they never cross it. Think of it like driving at night without a destination entered in the GPS. You're moving, you're technically making progress, but every exit looks the same, and you don't know if you've gone too far or not far enough. That's where Marcus is. That's where most people are. Diana didn't have a different work ethic. She had a different question. She asked, what does my life actually cost? And how much do I need invested for that money to pay me back forever without ever running out? That question has a concrete answer. And once you calculate it, everything changes. The framework most people in the financial independence world use is called the 4% rule. The original research, published by 3 finance professors in 1994 and known as the Trinity Study, found that a portfolio invested in a mix of stocks and bonds could sustain a 4% annual withdrawal rate over a 30-year retirement without running out of money. At a 7% real return, the S&P 500's long-term average after inflation, your money keeps pace. You pull out 4%, the rest compounds. What that means in practice is this. If you need $40,000 a year to live, you divide that by 0.04. Your number is $1 million. If you need $60,000 a year, you need $1.5 million. If you need $80,000, which covers rent, healthcare, 2 kids and activities, and some breathing room in most mid-size American cities, you need $2 million. Now here's where most people check out, because those numbers feel enormous. But the 4% rule was designed for 30-year retirements. If you're 35, you're potentially funding 50-plus years of living. A lot of FIRE researchers now suggest a 3.5% withdrawal rate for early retirees, which shifts those numbers up. At 3.5%, a $40,000 annual need becomes a $1,140,000 target. A $60,000 lifestyle costs you $1,710,000 to fund forever. Those are the real numbers, not the ones on the thumbnail of a YouTube video that promises you can retire on $500,000 at 40. There are 3 tiers worth understanding. The first is what people call lean fire, living on $35,000 to $45,000 a year, which in 2025 requires roughly $875,000 to $1.1 million invested. This is Diana's tier. She budgeted $36,000 a year. Rent in Columbus for a modest 2-bedroom runs about $1,200 a month. Healthcare on the ACA marketplace at her age and income level, roughly $450 a month. Groceries, car insurance, utilities. She ran the numbers 3 times. $890,000 at a 3.5% draw gives her $31,150 a year. Close, but tight. She has a part-time tutoring arrangement that covers the gap. That's enough. The second tier is standard fire, living on $55,000 to $75,000 a year. This requires somewhere between $1.375 million and $1.875 million. This is the range that covers most American households, with a mortgage-free life, 2 adults, and modest travel. This is also the range that takes the longest to reach from a median income, which is why it represents the largest single group of people stuck in the just one more year trap. The third tier is fat fire, $100,000 or more per year, requiring $2.5 million and up. This is for people who want their retirement lifestyle to look a lot like their working life, just without the job. Marcus is targeting standard fire without knowing it. His lifestyle runs about $65,000 a year, mortgage paid off in theory, but he's still carrying student loans. His real target, if he did the math honestly, is $1,625,000. He has $340,000. He's not close, but he's not as far as he thinks either. At 35, with $340,000 already invested and consistent contributions of $2,500 a month, which is roughly what he puts in, a 7% average annual return puts him at $1,625,000 in approximately 13 years. He'd be 48. That's not 35, but it's also not 65. And here's the thing about that math. The number doesn't move as fast in the early years. From $340,000 to $500,000 feels agonizingly slow. But once Marcus crosses $600,000, compound interest starts pulling more weight than his contributions. By the time he's at $900,000, the market is adding more each year than he is. The portfolio does the heavy lifting. He just has to not touch it. This is what the financial independence community calls the crossover point. Not when you hit your final number, but when your invested assets start generating more passive growth per year than you earn from working. For most people at Marcus's savings rate, that crossover happens somewhere around the $700,000 to $800,000 mark. He's about halfway there. But here's the part of this conversation that doesn't get enough attention. The math is solvable. The psychology isn't. Marcus knows how compound interest works. He could calculate his crossover point in 20 minutes. He hasn't done it. Not because he's lazy, but because there's a version of not knowing that feels safer than knowing. If he doesn't calculate it, he can't be wrong. If he doesn't set a target, he can't miss it. This is what researchers call just one more year syndrome. It's the phenomenon where people who have already hit their financial freedom number keep working, not because they need to, but because certainty about when to stop feels impossible. Studies from the Employee Benefit Research Institute found that nearly 47% of retirees left the workforce earlier than planned, often due to health or layoffs. But among people who had the resources to retire early voluntarily, a significant portion delayed by 2 to 5 years past their actual target, not for money, but for psychological security. Diana didn't have perfect certainty. She had a decision. She sat down with a notebook, not a financial planner, just a notebook, and wrote out every monthly expense. She gave herself a $500 buffer for the unexpected. She looked at her $890,000. She did the multiplication. And then she stopped waiting. Freedom isn't confidence. It's deciding that the math is close enough. There are 3 things that separate the people who find their number from the people who don't. The first is calculating from lifestyle down, not income up. Your FIRE number has nothing to do with your income. It's entirely determined by what you spend. Diana didn't know her target until she tracked her spending for 3 months. She was living on less than she thought. That single realization moved her timeline forward by 4 years. The second is accounting for the healthcare gap. If you stop working at 35, you have 30 years before Medicare at 65. In 2025, a healthy 35-year-old on the ACA marketplace pays roughly $400 to $550 a month for a mid-tier plan. Over 30 years, that's a 6-figure variable that needs to be in your number. Most people forget it until the first bill lands. The third is using real inflation, not optimistic inflation. The long-term U.S. average is about 3%, but for healthcare and housing, actual inflation has run closer to 5 to 7% over the past decade. For a 50-year retirement, use 3.5% as your floor. It shifts your target number up roughly 15%, but it's the difference between a plan that holds and one that doesn't. The pattern I've seen consistently: the people who reach financial independence early are not always the highest earners. They're the ones who calculated honestly and didn't move the goalposts once they got close. Marcus eventually did the math. One evening, he opened a spreadsheet and spent 45 minutes with real numbers: his actual spending, his actual target, his actual timeline. Nothing about his portfolio changed that night. He still had $340,000, he was still 35, but he had a destination, and that changed how the whole thing felt. Diana is somewhere outside Columbus right now, probably not thinking about money at all. That's what financial freedom actually looks like when you get there. It's quiet. It's ordinary. It's Tuesday afternoon with nothing you have to do. The only thing standing between most people and their crossover point is the 15 minutes it takes to actually calculate it. Freedom isn't a number, but you can't find the door without one. If you've hit a milestone, 100K, 500K, your crossover point, anything, drop it in the comments. No context needed, just the number. You'd be surprised how much it helps someone else keep going.